talking.
Well, I think Ruth started first faculty member. I was a student before she went there, though.
Yes. Well, how about Lola, starting the student days?
I was a student.
Go back to that.
41, 42. Right. I was preceded you.
Was it a one-year master's?
No, it was 3 years, and I only went 1 year.
Oh, that was
Because I didn't have enough money to go the second year. Yeah.
I had a one-year master's in 39.
Well, then you're the first, and you're the first, and you should do it. And I was 41.
Well, I bridged too many generations. Why don't you begin?
No, I think the first should be first.
In
I'll
1939.
tell you about your student.
Were you in the
39, and
Yeah.
then I'll tell about 41. And then
Well, I have more to talk about my student days in 49 than I do in 39 because
Yeah,
I was
I even
part-time.
remember.
Well, I was
Well, but tell about
part-time.
that, because that was part of it.
Did you have music?
Yes, at the motion picture release.
Oh, yes. Well, you should tell that. You should tell that.
Tell us about
now,
it,
you tell that,
Joe.
and then I'll tell about 41.
Oh, and then we'll go
then we'll
on
go-
chronologically, you mean?
Yeah, right.
History.
That's right.
Am I supposed to identify myself?
Yeah,
You
sure.
better give us a little orientation here
Yeah, you
so
you
that
tell us
Ruth
what you
will know
want.
what it's all about.
Right. Yeah.
I'm Joe DiPaola, who's been a student twice at the USC School of Social Work and a faculty member subsequently. I went to USC for my first graduate work during the Depression years and got a one-year master's degree in 1939. Arlene Johnson was then the dean. I had a part-time program spanning a number of years.
So you were working on the side.
That's right. And I
Or going
remember,
to school at the time.
I remember vividly my fieldwork placement, which was with the Motion Picture Relief Fund. Fieldwork was difficult to arrange in those days because there was a shortage of field instructors and agencies which could provide the learning experiences
So that was
that met
strictly
the
from hunger
students.
that you had to go to school.
Yes. That proved to be an informal and sort of different experience from anything I remember before or since. It was actually as colorful as we all expect the motion picture industry to be, but a lot of fun, actually. But I felt
Rose, I didn't mean to.
the world at that time, and then World War II came along, and things started moving rapidly for all of us professionally at that point. And returned to the school for the full master's degree in 1940.
Did you go for 2 years?
A year and a half. Arlene was still the dean, and she worked that individualized program. I had a full second year, and one semester the second year.
I should be next in terms of the chronology. I am Lola Selby. I drifted into social work during the depths of the Depression when the career I had planned for myself was not open to me because of the Depression. But social work I was intending to teach English and social science in high school or college, and I had a master's degree and a general secondary certificate, but I couldn't get a job because I had not had experience. At that point in time, I was absolutely without any employment in the depths of the Depression, and I was looking for jobs in such places as Woolworths and wherever, and I couldn't find a thing because I had not had experience. So I saw an ad in the paper one day in Long Beach, where I was living at that time, that said free tuition in exchange for services at a business college. I went down to see what could be offered, and because I had a master's in English and could write a good letter, the director of the business college took me on to write her correspondence, and I took some training in business. I had about 6 months of this, hoping that I would finish with some marketable services, when the only friend I knew from my high school or college days who had gone into social work called me one day and said, "Would you like to come over to the unemployment relief office," which preceded Social Security, and serve as a substitute for secretaries who were on vacation? I delightedly went over, and worked for several sessions for various people who went on vacation. And I took dictaphone work and was a clerical person and so on. Then, because the officers of that organization noted that I had a master's degree, they decided to offer me a file, as the term was in those days. So I got into social work. And as I got into that, I decided I really didn't know very much about what social work was about, and I started taking night school courses. I was living in Long Beach, working in the Long Beach Unemployment Relief Office. I drove up to Los Angeles to take night school courses at the USC Continuing Education, or what is now called Continuing Education Department. And I had my early courses from such people as, goodness, what's her name? Mangold, and the two Youngs, and what's her name, the one that taught interviewing, who was a sociologist? McClanahan. And I decided that I needed further education. But however, in the meantime, the Social Security Act was passed, and I was shunted into the SRA program, where I worked until 1941. When that closed, then I decided to go back to school for a stint on campus. I arrived at USC in the fall of 1941. I had Arlene Johnson was the dean, and I also had a course from her in administration, which really was a very fascinating course. I had Harley Trecker for group work. I had Ruby Inlow for casework, and a few other assorted people, but those were the main ones. And at the end of that semester, World War II broke out. I had no more money because I spent all my retirement pay on that one semester's service, but I got a one-year certificate, which was given in those days, one-year certificate in social work. So I had my field work in this semester with Traveler's Aid under Mary Del Sasso, as her name is now. It was then Mary Van Dusen. A marvelous experience. And because I'd had that experience, and because I didn't have any money to go on to school, and because the war effort was requiring more people, I got into USO Traveler's Aid. And I'll continue later because I went back for a second year at a much later point.
I am Rose Green, and I guess I've had some of the checkered career that coming into social work that Lola has just described, so I won't go into much of that. I would like to say that my undergraduate studies were at the University of Pennsylvania, where I was determined to start very early in the very first semester collecting extra courses and extra units in mathematics, because I was going to be a teacher of mathematics in the Philadelphia high schools. By the second year of my studies there, I had my first course in sociology. And everything that I had decided up to that point took a second seat to sociology and the social sciences. I ended up having a double major then in sociology and in history, social sciences as it was called, with the most interesting experience of being the one female student in the Wharton School in a large class of men who had all of their fun and ribbing and teasing with me as the butt. Coming out of the university, I met the same problem of no jobs in teaching if you have had no experience up to this point. So I did many things. The most interesting, well, two that I'd like to mention. One was teaching of English to immigrants who wanted to become citizens of the USA. I found this one of the most rewarding teaching experiences, and the first connection of teaching with adults that I found very, very rewarding. The other one, you might not dream of making this connection, was teaching of dancing to children, which I did every Saturday and enjoyed just as much. After these varied experiences, I did get a job in teaching in the elementary schools. This was recommended because by now I wanted to use my social sciences, social studies, and want to do something that would be in the sphere of social relationships and social problems, and was told that I really should have experience in teaching of elementary children, elementary school children, as the best spot for an entree into problematic matters with children and their families and in studies in school. After a couple of years of that, I went to Smith for their full social work training at that time, and ended up with the Master of Social Science degree as it was awarded in those days. This was 1929. At that point, I did go into social work practice in a child guidance clinic in Philadelphia and stayed a good many years. As many of my colleagues would often say when we met at national conferences, "Are you still at that same place?" And I would have to say yes. I had often inquired into others, or flattering to me, had gotten letters of inviting my thinking about jobs in other places, which I did do. And I came out of each one thinking that the spot I was in still offered more than any of the new places seemed to offer at the point of my inquiry.
And quite a different frame of reference from what you've been brought up on.
Yes. I did learn a great deal at this clinic, and Lola here has just been reminding me that it represented quite many differences, and some strong differences, from the basic teaching and learning at Smith in the preceding years of 1928 and 29. After 13 years of experience at the clinic, in which I did a number of things, one I want to stress really added a great deal to my horizon, or rather the breadth of contributions to social problems, had to do with my being what was then called the head of cooperative work. In that area for 6 or 7 years, I was in charge of all admissions to the clinic of children for treatment or study that came from the social agencies in the Philadelphia community, not from their own parents. So I had lots to do with all the social agencies, which included homes for children and placement agencies for children, hospitals for children, and various health organizations for children. And out of that, I had a lot to do with the workers in those agencies, and became very interested in the whole network of relationships that both contributed to problems and had much to do with helping a child in an adjustment out of problems. It was from this experience that I wanted to do some teaching. And my first teaching was with public health nurses at the University of Pennsylvania in their master's program in a course that was entitled Casework Principles as Applied to Public Health Nursing. I don't know what they would think of that today, but I'm sure they have many courses in the same area of the study of relationships within a family that public health nurses and nurses in hospitals do get in their nurses training today. This gave me quite a yen to do some teaching with social workers. I wanted to try my hand with that task. And the first opening that came was to me was at the University of Minnesota. I was so full of ideas just out of practice and so eager in the teaching. I now see that as one element in it. Made my joining the faculty, which was just a group of 5 or 6, I think, not as easy a thing as I imagined, even though the director and the associate director talked with me about how they wanted, quotes, new blood in the school, and they wanted young people just out of practice to, as they said, quotes, give us a shot in the arm about what's going on in practice today. I joined the staff at the University of Minnesota in 1942, September 1942. Evidently, this shot in the arm was a bit stronger than I ever realized at the time, because much was stirred up within the school about some of the differences in teaching between other social casework teachers and myself, and more particularly, I think, in the interest and response of people in the community to something that they felt students were getting that was more attuned to practice of the day. This was not an easy situation for a group of teachers who'd been in teaching in the same school since about 1926 to really take in and adjust to. It ended in my leaving the University of Minnesota without the offer of tenure because of some of the difficulties that you may imagine within this situation. Much was stirred up in the community that I think now and thought then was more related to teaching that was related to practice rather than to personalities or points of view or psychologies. And this would be rather difficult for people who were nearing their time of retirement with the school. Anyway, yes, as the young blood or the young Turk, I'm getting some promptings from my friends here. I was very troubled by what happened there and left the school rather downcast and certainly pessimistic about the chance of ever teaching in a school of social work. This little rift evidently had made its mark in other places around the country, and there was really lots of discussion, most of which was put on point of view, which I would put on a teaching that was more related to practice and not that particularly to points of view about it. Well, anyway, in this, low point, Arlene Johnson wrote to me while I was still at Minnesota, I think in the early fall of that 4th year, asking if I would be interested to come to teach at University of Southern California. Yes. Well, that would have been the fall of 45. We had some correspondence over the year, and we met at a national conference of the Schools of Social Work meeting at, I think, at Pittsburgh. Either Pittsburgh or Buffalo. But anyway, we met and talked about this. I was very interested in the teaching idea. I was very interested in California. I felt a great need to tell her my view of what had happened at Minnesota, and I can remember starting on this and said, Arlene, I think I called her Dean Johnson. I called her Dean Johnson. I'm slipping into what was a history of relationship much later. I called her Dean Johnson and said, I would like you to know what I think happened at Minnesota. She leaned across and patted me on the knee and said, I have one question to ask you, and that is, do you have a car? I gulped and said, yes, I have a car. She said, that is all I need to know. And so, in September of 1946, I joined the staff at the University of Southern California. If any of you recall that time, it was when the Second World War was over. Many of the men and women in service had had their taste of California, were coming back to California to live, and getting a place to live was extremely difficult. I stayed in motels to begin with. I had come early August to find a place to live and get settled, and I stayed in motels, which I had to leave after 5 days and pack up all my things, go to another one, and then stay there for 5 days and come back to the first one. I finally met a very good-hearted man who said he'd keep a place for me. If I would just go some other place for 2 days, I could come back there for another 5 days. And starting to teach with all the heaviness that I had about starting in a new place anyway, I do find the first year very difficult. It was not until May of that year that I found an apartment for myself. I remember talking rather loosely, I'd say now, to some friends in the community that if I didn't find a place to live before the summer vacation, I just could not come back, back to Southern California. That much as I wanted to teach, I just couldn't teach living the way I had for that year. It was really very... I'm sure there were many bad spots. But I'd like to tell you what was a tale that helped me get this apartment that I will never forget. I got the apartment through the help of one of my second-year students in class, in my own class at USC, who was a WAC, who was using the GI funds to come to school and get her social work training. And in order to get an apartment, all of which were being reserved for men and women out of the service, one needed to present your number, whatever your number was in the service. I've forgotten what they call that. I still call it a mustering out number. But that was perhaps the discharge number. Well, anyway...
Your serial.
Maybe. Anyway, I do know it was a number that I had to present, and since I had no number, I couldn't get a place to live. She came up one day after class, and this was after the story, which I very loosely told to a supervisor in the community that I think got around, that I just couldn't come back if I didn't have a place to live. She came up and offered me her number. I said I couldn't take that number because she was getting her degree this very June and would be finding a job for herself and would need that number herself to get a place to live. She had her job already worked out at the VA here in Los Angeles. She was staying right where she was living, and with all these very pressing arguments on her side, I did finally accept her number. And it was through that serial number that I was able to get the apartment on Lamert Boulevard. I see her face, but it'll come to me as we talk, I think. She was, well, I won't go into the details about it, that I do remember. I felt so uneasy about using this number that didn't belong to me that I insisted on putting her name up on the mailbox along with mine, and that she could have any use of this apartment or any part of it as long as she was in the city. She laughed at that and never did use it, and after the first year I did not repeat. Second year, of course, I could settle down. My furniture, which I'd sent on from Minnesota, had been in storage all this year. I finally got it and was able to set it around, and that in itself made me feel more settled and at home. Teaching at SC, I found a delight from the beginning. One of the things that Dean Johnson had talked with me about, in which I did have valid experience, was that of setting up a psychiatric social work sequence in the field work placements and in any particular coursework that was necessary.
You were the Charlotte Toll of SC.
Oh, I felt pretty good about this, or at least felt I'd had some good experience in it, in that that's what I had been asked to do at Minnesota, and had been able to complete that in the years that I was there, and to have the school accredited for what was then the specialized sequence in psychiatric social work. Another thing, which was an inside sense addition to my assurance about it, was that I was on the accrediting committee of the American Association of Psychiatric Social Workers.
That was powerful.
So with some strengths of this sort and strengths within the faculty, and I cannot leave that first and second year without talking of the strength of Ruby Inlow in her support for my coming and my being there, and about what I was doing and how I was doing it, that was so different from my experience at the other school that I still treasure it as an unusual experience that happened to me. Another thing in the first year that was very interesting was that Dean Johnson turned me over to John Milner for a tour around the campus and some talk about the school. I mean, after she and I had done quite a bit. He had arrived the preceding February. He, John Milner, and Sue Wagner had arrived the preceding February. And then when I arrived in September of 46, the faculty numbered 8. They had 5 before then, and the 3 of us new ones then made 8.
Yeah.
John took me over to the Rose Garden fairly soon. In Exposition Park, and it really is a beautiful spot, and I enjoyed it very much. He looked at me askance. I looked at him a bit askance, since I was now a little leery of other teachers in social work in relation to my starting out anew. You see, I'm going backward to that very first week in 1946. Oh, do you? Okay.
We have to get that.
I guess I'm avoiding that. I did hear things about it in the community that I didn't want to say in the history of the school. But anyway, what I remember with much pleasure was that John lifted me up to sit on the stone wall that surrounds the park, and it was there that he told me about the school and the community and, you know, many things that were nice to know and important to know, and then we walked back. I'm sure he was taking a measure of me in the same way that I was of him. And he was then specially teaching students in social casework practice in the first year, and I was teaching groups of them in the second year. My being uneasy about this and askance about that this was the very same situation that I had been in at Minnesota. Well, needless to say, we got the school accredited in psychiatric social work. I had great interest in developing placements in the community and talking with people and getting to know them, being very particular about supervisors. I can remember the very first week, I think, that the school was in session in 1946. With 1 day's notice, Dean Johnson asked me to lead a meeting of the school's field teachers who were coming in for a half day, and would I please take charge of it and talk with them about supervision in the field. And it was pretty hard to start, but in the end, I would say it was very good for me to begin that way. It was something rather difficult.